Hey everyone, I'm Kirsten, and today we are going to make this family number sign. Let me show you what we need. Okay, first off, these are the supplies that you're going to need. This is the family numbers plaque kit. You get all of the pieces, you pick your own number. Then we are going to use folk art chalk paint, which is my all-time favorite paint. We are going to use white, black, and then we are going to learn something new today. We are going to use the wax, which is the chalk paint white wax. So for brushes, I like to use whatever brush you're most comfortable with, but I always like to have a medium brush, a smaller brush, and a big brush. For the wax, you are going to need a stencil brush, not too big, about a medium-sized stencil brush. And then I always like to have a larger brush just to dust off, because with chalk paint, the reason I love it is because it sands so great. So make sure you have a little piece of sandpaper. Make sure you have a clean, dry cloth, because we're going to wipe off our project when we use the wax. And then always have a palette. One other thing that you're going to need today is a spouncer. Any spouncer works. It's just a little sponge ended brush. This is the one I like. A cup of water and your surfaces. Okay, so let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is just remove my little laser cut pieces and set those to the side. First thing we are going to do is base coat our sign. So always give the chalk paint a little shake. Take off the lid. And this is a little tip. I love to use the lid as a palette. So I'm going to pick my medium brush, get it a little bit wet. You never want a ton of water in your brush. And I am going to use that lid almost as a little palette to base coat my entire project. Now the great thing about chalk paint, the reason why I love it so much is because it is usually one coat. Sometimes two coats. Maybe with white, I might use two coats on this, which if you're going to do two coats, always just let the first coat dry and then apply your second coat. I'm going to get in there and actually base coat the entire plaque. I'm going to base coat the frame, the edges, the bottom part, and just get a really good coat of white on there. So we are going to base coat that. I'm using a medium brush just to make sure that I get into those little cracks really well. The wood takes the chalk paint great, so there's really no need to sand the wood first. The quality is so good. So get all of that painted, get your edges. Don't forget the outside. You want to make sure your project is complete. Whoops. And there again, I'm just going directly into the chalk paint bottle. I don't ever like to pour it out on a palette because then I feel like I'm wasting stuff. So I'm going to get all of that and I'm going to let that dry. Okay, almost done. Make sure you get a good coat on the flat part because that part of our project is actually going to stay white. The frame we're going to make black, as you saw in the finished project. So we are going to get that on there. I'm going to get the outside edge. See how the chalk paint is one coat and you cover completely. That's what I love about it. Chalk paint dries really fast, which is also something that I love. I would let this dry for maybe 30 minutes at the most. Just make sure that all the sections are dry, not just the flat part, because you don't want to mess up your paint colors. So make sure every section of your project is dry. Again, 30 minutes, an hour at the most. Apply a second coat if you think you need one. Okay, make sure I don't have any drips, any thick areas. I am going to let that dry completely. Now that I've let that dry, this is the plaque, completely base coated and completely painted white. Make sure it's dry. Okay, so now what we are going to do is the wax. The wax is wonderful. We have a clear wax, we have a white wax, and we also have a brown wax. The wax works as a varnish, but it's also a great tip to distressing when you're using the chalk paint. So again, give it a little shake. I like to use the lid as a palette. Okay, when you're working with the chalk paint, you use it at the end as a varnish, but what I'm going to do is show you how it makes sanding and distressing that much quicker and that much easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, using a stencil brush, I am going to dip that into the wax. You do not want a ton, you just want a little bit on there. I am going to paint just the edges of my project. And it doesn't have to be perfect because one, it's not going to show, and two, you kind of want it to be a little bit irregular on each side, because all this is going to do is create a barrier between the two colors so that sanding is that much easier. Okay, so I'm just going to get those edges. Never go in and do, a pattern on the flat spot. I'm just going to do the edges. Kind of think where your project would distress, like where it would naturally chip is where you want to add the wax. Okay, so I'm going to add that just around the frame area. Again, I'm using white so you don't really see it. You could do the same technique with the clear wax. So let that dry. Again, I would let that dry maybe about an hour. I have got a plaque, base coated white, and then you can't see, but the wax is all dried on there. You can actually feel it, but there is dried wax on those edges. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to paint our frame black. And what I did here, and this is up to you, I just painted the outside and the flat surface. I didn't paint that inside edge because I liked the way it created kind of like a shadow box. So we are going to paint, again, just a little shake of your chalk paint. Then you can use the lid as a palette. See? Then get another brush, and I am just going to paint the edge. So when you do this, I always like to start on the outside and then drag the brush towards the edge. That way you won't get any paint dripping off into that inside edge that you want to keep white. So again, start on the outside and then drag towards the edge, because if you would go the other way, you would create drips that would go down in there, which you could always touch up, but you don't want to have to do that. So again, get all your edges and go towards the edge. Make sure you get the outside edge. I want that to be black as well. I dip right into the bottle. Look at the coverage that you're getting with that black chalk paint. It's so perfect. That's why I love it. It's the best paint out there. Okay, again, I'm pulling towards the edge. Sounds so simple, but it really makes crafting that much easier, because then you're not having to go back in there and clean up that inside edge. See how not too much paint, but you're just pulling it towards that. Okay, then going back and doing the edge is quick and easy. You can use a lot of paint for that. That black and white together is so popular. Again, getting that edge. Let me get the bottom. There we go. Whoops. Okay, almost done. Again, pulling that way. Now, always have fun with this. You could do a gray edge, you could do a blue edge, but the black and the white is the color that I prefer right now. That barn farm trend is so popular, and that clean, simple white look is very popular. Okay, I'm almost done. Get all those edges. There we go. Okay, and look at that. Nowhere do I need to go back and touch it up. Okay, make sure you don't have any areas that are thick. Just kind of go over it one more time. Okay, all of that is painted, so now I'm going to let that dry completely. And again, let the chalk paint dry about 30 minutes. What I want to do is show you how to do the little laser pieces. I love when you get a laser piece, I love the brown edges. So we're using black, so it won't really show that much, but I like to leave the edges brown. The easiest way, I think, to paint the little laser pieces is to use that spouncer that we were talking about. So again, using the lid as your little palette, pounce into the paint. You don't want a ton of paint on there dripping off, but then you just pounce onto your laser piece. You get great coverage. Nothing drips off the edges, nothing to clean up. It's just very quick and easy. Okay, I'm going to scoot that to the side. Let's do the numbers. Now these number signs, I love this project because it's the greatest gift. You can personalize, you can make it for somebody for a birthday or for a holiday, and you can pick any number that you want. Whatever number represents their family is what you can order when you're ordering this kit. So I happen to be 2 and 2, but you could be 2 and 3, 2 and 4, 2 and 5. I don't know anyone bigger than 5. I'm going to stop there, but you can order whatever number that you want. But see, when you're using the pouncer, how great the coverage is, and you don't get any drips down the side. If you were to use a brush, you'd have a big mess. Okay, this is a simple tip, but people always ask, whenever you're painting these laser words, look, they're so fragile. Always leave them flat on a surface. If you were to hold this and paint it, they snap so easy. You don't want that. Okay, so again, just hold that down on your surface and just pounce. The chalk paint is one coat coverage and nothing gets in those nooks and crannies that you have to clean up after. I love that. And if you were not using blacks, like say you were using white or a light gray, it's really neat to see those brown edges that are on all the laser pieces. Okay, that's almost covered. There we go. Now let me do just my plus sign. Gonna get that completely base coated. Just keep reloading your spouncer. Now there are links below for all of the products that we're using, so make sure you check those out. Okay, so you're gonna let those dry, and then what we are going to do is so this is, the white is dry, we added the wax is dry, then we base coated the black, and now the black is dry. So now we're gonna get to the fun stuff. This is what makes it look like a distressed farmhouse sign. So you can see it's really bright, really shiny, it's a solid black. Chalk paint always sands. It sands wonderfully. That's why everybody loves the chalk paint. Adding the wax makes it sand that much better. So what we have done is we've created a barrier in between the white and the black. So let me scoot this out of here. One thing with the chalk paint is it does create some dust, so make sure you've covered your work area. So medium grit sandpaper. Can you see how literally one swipe of the sandpaper, can you see how much of the white has come through, creating that distressed 100-year-old barn frame look? Here, I'm going to do it again on the bottom. One swipe, look at that. One swipe, and you get so much character. You get all those chips. Now, no, you would also get that with chalk paint because that's the characteristic, but the wax just makes it that much easier. I'm going to do this side. Again, just one little swipe. Look at that. Oh, I love it. Don't forget your edges. So not only is it smoothing down your project, but it is also creating that very trendy farmhouse look. So don't forget what I said. Always have a brush with chalk paint that is dry and clean, just as a duster. You want to go in there and always remove all that powder that you've sanded. Tap it on your surface, but you want to get that off of your project for the next step. Okay, so get that off. But the wax, do you see how great that is? That's what I love about the wax. Okay, dust off that project really, really good. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to sand our letters. So our letters have dried. Our letters have dried. Now, another little tip that sounds so simple, but when people don't do it, it really can make a disaster. Make sure when you're sanding anything laser cut, you always lay it flat. Sometimes if it's a big word like that, I'll use double sticky tape. I don't think you need to for this because we're just going to barely sand it. But lay it flat on your surface and then just rub your sandpaper right over that. Give it a tap. I'm going to do that. But see how easy that chalk paint comes right off of there and creates those distressed edges. And this is just medium grit sandpaper. So use whatever sandpaper you're most comfortable with. I always like a medium grit. Okay, I'm gonna tear that off. And here's where the tricky part. See, they're beautiful because they have all those little details, but keep them flat on your surface. I can't stress that enough. But again, they sand so easy because of the chalk paint. Make sure you hold each section. I can't tell you how many I've snapped. Each section of your word as you sand. Look at that. You just want enough. You just want enough to create that soft distressed edge. You don't want to sand it too much. Okay, so those are sanded. I'm going to set those to the side. And now we are going to, let me dust that off. Now we are going to varnish with the wax, which for the longest time I thought that is so crazy. I don't want to varnish with wax. This wax gives the softest, smoothest finish. You're going to love it. Okay, so now that your plaque is dried, you've distressed it, you've sanded it, make sure you dust it off really good because there's lots of powder when you sand chalk paint. So I've got my frame and I've got my letters. To varnish with the wax, what I love to do is, again, that little tip, I love the lid. Using your same stencil brush, I like to add a good amount of water right in there on the lid. So maybe 2 dips into the water, stir that up. You want it to be very, very watery, almost like milk. Okay, so now what you want to do, you know what, we'll do our little shapes first. You want to just brush that on there. Let it sit for just a minute. See how I'm choosing to use the white wax, so it's kind of leaving a milky cover, but just cover that with the wax. It actually distresses it a little bit. It adds some character. It warms up the color, but it also seals it and varnishes it. The wax makes an absolutely incredible varnish. Very, very, very durable. Okay, so I'm just going to cover. This is an indoor project, so I'm not too worried about all those nooks and crannies. Okay, so let it sit just for a second, and then I'm going to take, this is just a clean, dry rag, and I am just going to basically buff off most of the wax that I applied. It brings the black back, but it leaves just enough of the wax, again, to create that distressed layer that's so trending right now with the farmhouse look. And I wish you could feel it. It is the silkiest, smoothest finish. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the wax just seals everything together. It's so silky and smooth and protective. Okay, so I'm going to wipe that on there. And again, if you want a really strong black color, there's a clear wax that you can use. Now make sure you put comments below and we'll get back to you if you guys have any questions. But before it's dry, you are just buffing off that wax to get that smooth varnish finish. Now again, be careful with your laser letter. Keep that flat and hold each section at a time. So I'm just going to wipe one section at a time because again, these things are beautiful, but they are very, very fragile. So I am just removing most of that wax, but see how it's just softening up that look? Okay, so I've taken most of that off. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to set that to the side and I'm going to let that dry. Okay, now we are going to wax our big sign. Okay, and you're going to use the exact same technique. You're going to use your lid. You're going to get a little bit more water just because you're working on a bigger area. And what I like to do, because we did 2 colors, we have black and white. When you're waxing something that's 2 colors, always start with your light color first. And mainly just because you'll pick up a little bit of the dark color in your wax and you don't want to get too much of that on your white. So again, you can't do this wrong. All I'm going to do is start in the edges, kind of jam that stencil brush in there. Make sure you guys can see that. Jam that stencil brush in there and just make sure it's all covered. If you need to add a little bit more water, that's good because you don't want to use too much wax because then it'll just build up on your project. So again, you're just kind of varnishing very loosely the white part of your project. Get some more out of the bottle if you need it. And see how it tints it a little bit? That's the reason I chose to use the white, because I wanted it to age the white, but still be white. So it just gives it a little bit more character. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit more wax, put it in my lid, a little bit more water, mix those together, and now using the same brush, I am going to do the black part of my frame. And again, you're just gonna put one simple coat all the way around your frame. You're gonna get your edges real good. But you did the black second because you're gonna pick up just a little bit of that black when you're using the wax. Okay, don't let it dry. If you let it dry, you're not gonna be able to get that black color back. So again, using a dry cloth, I am just gonna wipe. And I know it appears that I'm wiping off all the wax, but I'm really not. When you use it, you are gonna be so impressed. It just makes the smoothest, most satin finish. It got in there and sealed both the black and the white and all of the sanding that we did. So I'm just gonna wipe that. I'm gonna wipe the edges real good. I want it to be black, but I like that it's a softer black. It's not real harsh. Okay, I'm gonna fold my rag, just get a little clean spot, and then I'm just very lightly gonna wipe down the white part just to make sure I didn't have any spots that were kind of built up. But I want that distressed finish in there. And the neat thing about adding the water to the wax is it gives you kind of an irregular finish, which is what you want, because all you're trying to do is create layer and layer of character to create something that's old and barnwood. Okay, so let the wax dry, again, maybe 30 minutes, and once that dries, the wax on all of your pieces, here is all the little elements completely dry. Here's your frame, completely dried, smooth, varnish, protected. I'm gonna dust it off just one more time with another brush that I've got, just to make sure that there's nothing that's gonna get into my glue. Okay, I'm gonna dust that off. And now my favorite thing is to use a hot glue gun. I love it because it's just quick and instant. But you can use wood glue, you can use tacky glue. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay out my project first, position everything on there, make sure the spacing is kind of what I want. There we go. Okay, and then with the hot glue, you do not need a lot of glue. I always do just 2 little dots on there, 2 or 3, depending on how big your shape is. And just place that on there, position it, move it around just for a minute because it'll stick. And then apply that to your plaque. That thing is varnished, it's sealed, it's distressed. I'm gonna add that one right there, make sure it's straight. But then you would just glue all of your pieces down and you have the greatest personalized number sign. I love these for a birthday, for Christmas, for any holiday. It's just personalized and it's custom and it's great for everybody. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed making this family numbers plaque. If you enjoyed this video, please press the thumbs up button and subscribe. And if you ring the bell, we will let you know when our new videos are out. Thanks so much. For more inspiration about Unfinished Woodco and their amazing wood surfaces, go to unfinishedwoodco.com. Hey dog.